Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's all good and great and wonderful. Everything here is fantastic. And I wanted to finally introduce you to my game, Hedeby Northern Saga. I've talked a lot about this recently, and this game I am insanely proud of. This has been in development for about, honestly, 20 years. In one form or another. I have been trying to work on a dice-based engine building game for 20 years, and this version is really, really close to my original intent. This is a game about Vikings. In the 800s, the Danish king Godfred decided to go raid and sack a Slavic town known as Rarik that was across the Baltic Sea. And when he did that, he took all those people and brought them back to the port town of Hedeby, and from that built a city around these craftspeople and their talents. That city ended up becoming a pretty major trading port for the region, and so that's what this game is. It is a city building game that uses dice as a randomizer for resources, and it's an engine builder, right? So what we have is a board that has a few things on it players might be interested in. For one, we have blessings. Blessings are essentially rerolls. You can use them to reroll dice to help control the randomness. Down here, in this corner, we have lands. Lands are, one shot, buy it, it does something. For instance, this one gives you extra workers. You only start with a limited supply of workers, and you need more as the game progresses, or you will fall quickly behind. We have ships, because what would a Viking game be without ships that go raiding? And we also have folk cards. Folk cards represent the various people that you can employ in your district of Hedeby to make things a little easier on you. We have a trader, which can turn resources into silver. We have a Verk, which can roll you extra dice each turn. We have a Skipper, which is a skipper, basically, in naval terms, which helps you raid and attack. And we have a warrior, which does the same. There's also some victory points in here, and a Bondi, a farmer, which lets you get some extra resources. And then we have a Herser, which is like a protector. So those are the things that end up on the board at the start of the game. Oh, we also have this little rating track. This is essentially the game length. For a 4-player game, I recommend that you set it at 12. It can go down or up based on your personal choice. So I've left it long in case you want to play a longer game. It's totally up to the players. The other things that go on this board are decks of cards. So these decks of cards are the engine. These are the way that you're going to build up your district of Hedeby, and you're going to, help contain and control the randomness of this game. That has been my design goal all these years, is to have a set of dice that at the beginning of the game are pretty restrictive. Like you start off not being able to control them really at all. Now you do start the game with 2 blessings, so you do start the game with some rerolls. But besides that, you don't have any control over these dice. And they can be very, dicey, right? But as you play the game, as you continue to take turns, as you roll dice, as you get more resources, as you start getting the ability to build more of your engine, you will take more control over the randomness of these dice, and by the end of the game, they really shouldn't be that much of a hindrance. At the start of the game, everybody starts rolling 5 dice. There are, if you notice, 3 white dice, 3 green dice. They have the same sides, but the white dice have 2 silver icons as opposed to 1, and they also have a raid icon in opposition to the second silver side on these. The various resources in the game are stone and wood and food and leather. So those are the other 4 sides on the dice besides the silver. And these are what are used to not only build buildings or holdings, as they're called in the game, but also to pay for various abilities that help you mitigate the randomness of the dice. And silver silver is the resource that lets you buy a bunch of things. So silver lets you buy ships, silver lets you buy land, silver lets you activate a whole lot of scoring abilities that are inside these decks. As I mentioned earlier, everybody starts the game with a limited number of Vikings. We all start with 5. So at the start of the game, you have very limited ability, very limited reach, because you can only do, not necessarily 5 actions, but you can only do 5 things that require these guys, like buying a ship. When you buy a ship, it goes out to sea, and you have to have a worker on every single one of your ships, or it can't sail. So in the beginning, you're limited to the number of ships you can have. The way ships work, when you first purchase them, you can place them at one of the 4 raiding locations. We have forage, village, town, and city. And these correspond to the forage action, which lets you just gain free resources, or the 3 decks. Once the round ends, so on your turn you're going to roll dice, you're going to get resources. In this case I would get 2 wheat, 2 wood, and a silver. Once I've taken my resources, I buy my ships, and you buy your ships, and we buy land, and we buy more cards, or we re-roll dice, or whatever. At the end of the round, as long as there is enough attack strength at each of these locations, they will be raided. So here, this Snekja, this is a ship that produces 1 attack. That's not enough to defeat the 4 defense of the village. So if we had some extra ships there, let's pretend like this happened. I have some extra guys there. We will raid that village. What happens when we raid? Well, we get to draft cards from this deck. I don't think it's shuffled. Oh, it is shuffled. We would draft cards from the deck by flipping over the top 6. And then in rating strength order, we get to draft these cards. So, I have a strength of 5. If you had a strength of 4, I would get to pick first, and I'll take a card and put it in front of me. When I do that, cards have 2 requirements. They have a resources that are required to build them, but they also have a worker requirement in order to have them under construction. So I would have to have a guy available to put on this card the moment that I take it. If I don't, I can't take it. It just gets discarded. Once this is constructed, so once I have the leather and the wood or the food to construct this card, this worker goes away, I get him back, and now this building becomes activated and I get all of its benefits. It provides victory points. It also provides abilities. This card in particular says I can pay 1 resource to gain a leather. So at any point in the time in the future, if I had a wood and I didn't want it, I could trade it in and get a leather. So we flip these cards over, we draft from these cards, we put them in front of us, and then we spend our next turns rolling dice trying to get the resources to build them. You don't have to build buildings on 1 turn. You can build them over a series of turns. You just put the resources on here until it's fully built. Once it's fully built, you remove all of this, and now you immediately have use of this building. The folk cards tend to be playable just about any time, but the game is broken up into phases. So you have phase 1, which is rolling dice, phase 2, which is collecting resources from the dice that you rolled, phase 3 is taking all these actions, and then the 4th phase is this raiding event. Once raiding happens, by the way, chances are we'll lose some ships. So at the village, if you have less than 4 strength, you have to discard one of your ships. This represents not only ships taking damage, but just ships needing to be repaired through use. Especially you're bringing back a whole bunch of stuff, so you'll have to repair your ships. If you have 4 or more strength, though, like I did, I wouldn't lose anything at the village. But looking over at the town and the city, this town, you will lose 1 ship regardless of how much strength you have. If you have less than 6, you're going to lose 2. And the same goes for the city. So you'll take turns, rolling dice, getting resources, and then everybody takes 1 action at a time until all players pass. Raids are resolved, and then we repeat with the next round. And it plays out really, really well. I'm really happy with it. I told you guys on the channel a couple weeks back that the game requires 50 dice. It does not. It really only requires 10, and what we do in that situation is we take turns rolling. I roll my dice, I do any re-rolls or any sort of dice manipulation abilities that I might have, and once I'm done with that, I collect my resources and I pass to you. And we do all of the resource gathering, and then we take actions. And it works fine that way. It's quicker if everybody has their own set of dice. So if it was up to me, the game would come with about 40 dice. But I recognize that that's a lot. So It's honestly a pretty straightforward and simple game. The complexity comes into buying these buildings and building out some sort of engine. By the way, buildings also come in one of 5 types. So there's a whole bunch of keywords, for food, craftspeople, or municipal buildings and there's military buildings that trigger all sorts of effects based on how many of those you have or whether or not your opponents have them. There are cards that are in effect on your opponent's turn. So when they roll the dice, if they roll something specific, you get something. There's a whole lot of subtle gains that are made through these buildings that can chain into something quite big. And by the end of the game, you might be rolling 10 dice and getting 10 resources. You might have 12 workers, so you can have all kinds of ships out and all kinds of buildings under construction. You can be spending your workers to get silver or get more blessings or get more folk. There's a whole lot of little incremental gains that add up to kind of a big finale, and it works out really, really well with the drafting of the cards. So that's Hedeby, Northern Saga. I think I actually am calling it Northern Saga Hedeby, so said that backwards, but finally glad to introduce you to the game. So thank you for being here as always. Thank you for watching or liking and commenting and subscribing and being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is homeostasis. It's a noun meaning a dynamic system in which balance between input and output has been achieved so no net changes take place. When homeostasis is achieved in a sealed biosphere, the animals and plants can live without outside air, food, or water. Homeostasis. Homeostasis. Whatever happened to, like in the 80s and 90s, there was this like biodome rush. We were going to create these domes and models of structures we could put on planets and moons where people could live. I don't think they ever actually worked out.